They stamped me dangerous in red, but the only weapon I brought was my eyes. Rain had flattened the city into a smear. St. Augustine Medical Center swallowed me whole anyway. Fluorescent hum like a hive, waxed floors, bleach bite in the throat. I'm Riley Hart, 29, former EMT trainee, who blew it in the back of an ambulance when a kid's breathing went sideways, and my hands shook so hard the oxygen mask rattled. I walked out, then wrapped my life in night shifts at the coffee shop on Maple, tamping espresso like it could hold me together. Today's just a routine checkup. That's what I told myself. Dread sat under my ribs, mean and heavy. I came anyway, stubborn like a dare. I am more than a label. I have to be. Intake tablet. Name, date of birth, allergies. Then the red banner. Behavioral alert. Their term for me. A nurse glanced, smile stalling for half a second, then picked it back up like it had never slipped. A security guard near the vending machine didn't look at me until he did, and then he didn't stop. The waiting room was a slow ballet of people pretending not to stare. A TV muttered the weather. Somewhere a printer coughed paper. And then he walked in. Dr. Marcus Hale, the heart guy, the one they put on billboards. Scrubs pressed sharp, jaw set. He wore professionalism like armor. Beside him, a kid in a dinosaur hoodie with big eyes and restless hands. Theo. 9, I'd guess. Quick questions for the nurse. Shoe untied. His dad's hand hovered, but didn't land. I clocked it all and told myself to stare at the ficus. In the vitals ring, the cuff squeezed my arm. I felt watched and tried not to look dangerous. Through the open door, Theo swung his legs, lips a touch too blue at the edges when he laughed at something on his tablet. Not chapped, cyanotic. His fingers trembled, thread-thin. He reached to scratch his ankle and I saw it, a lacy purple netting under the skin. Livido. My stomach dropped. I'd seen it in a chapter of my own file from years ago, bullets and underlines. And when the nurse pressed her stethoscope to his chest the second time, her eyebrows pinched. New murmur. I didn't mean to stand. He needs a pulse ox now. My voice came out too loud. The nurse froze. The tablet near her lit up a soft ping, and the security guard in the hall straightened like a dog catching a scent. Dr. Hale turned. Excuse me? Your son's lips, I said, words tumbling. The tremor, that rash. He's got splinter hemorrhages under his nails. Look at his left thumb. New murmur. You're thinking viral, but those signs together, think endocarditis. He could throw a clot. He could stroke. Please. His face went still, like I'd hit him in a place he didn't show to cameras. The nurse hesitated because the nurse had read my red banner. The guard was already moving. I could feel the old panic skittering up my spine, that hot shame with teeth. The nurse glanced at Dr. Hale, not me. He snapped, pulse ox now, and the clip went on Theo's finger. The numbers stumbled, settled at 89. Too low. The air changed. Orders lined up in his voice like soldiers. Blood cultures echo, page peds cards. Protocol wrenched it apart just as fast. Dr. Hale, the charge nurse said, you can't sign for your son. Consent needed. Mom. Mom was in traffic. The echo tech was on a lunch break, and the backup machine had a dead battery. The lab's blood culture incubator was flagged for maintenance. A chorus of almosts. Security planted himself between me and the kid. Sir, I need you to step back. I'm not a sir, I said, uselessly. I stepped back anyway, because I know how to obey. Because I didn't want to be the problem that cost a boy his heart. My palms were damp. I couldn't look away from Theo's chest rising too fast. I tasted metal. Memories knifed. The ambulance, the kid's eyes then, how I froze. I hated I was here at all. I was terrified I was exactly who I needed to be. Doctor. Hale didn't look at me until he did, and when he did, there was a crack in the armor. Quiet, the kind of quiet you lean into. How did you know? Before I could answer, a monitor screamed from behind a curtain. Every head snapped, nurses moved, the guard radioed. And when the nurse's tablet flashed again in her hand, I saw the timestamp under my red alert. It wasn't old. It was added last week by someone with a badge from cardiothoracic surgery. The hospital called me dangerous. Someone here made sure it's stuck. In his department. In his house. I'm Mia Sullivan, 32, a night shift nurse on the elderly ward of Hillcrest Hospital. The place has a specific smell, like bleach and boiled cabbage, underscored by that faint whiff of antiseptic that never quite leaves you. Night shifts are the worst. The cold radiates from the walls, and the only warmth comes from the scattered red lights of the monitors. Blinking like small warning signals in the dark, every creak of the floor sounds like a ghost, and the hushed whispers of doctors and nurses float through the air, blending with the steady beeping from the machines. My shift starts around midnight when the world outside is asleep, and I'm reminded of how my choices have tangled up my own life. I used to think it would be different. I dreamed of being a nurse since I was a kid, spurred on by the stories my grandmother told me, her frustration over not being able to pew. But dreams come at a cost, even if you think you've been prepared. I watched my best friend have a baby while I settled for late-night shifts, swapping birthday parties for IV pushes and wounds to dress. My parents still ask when I'm going to settle down, but my heart pulls me back to this ward every time. I leave my apartment in the mornings, the sun just starting to spill its light into the streets, and I can barely muster a smile at the neighbors I don't know. I give my rundown van a pat when it starts, but it's really my heart I worry about. The bills pile up, and every month's a gamble. My grandmother needed someone to help her in the evenings lately, but there were just too many shifts to take off. I don't think she understands, but I can see it etched in her face when I say I can't come over, that I'll be working late again. It aches me how she's fading, and yet here I am, a nurse helping strangers, while my own family flounders. Sometimes I catch myself staring too long. I didn't realize how much it would crush him until I saw the pictures on my phone of him, cake everywhere, and his little face pressed into a smile that cracked when the candles didn't greet him. I traded that joy for charting and patient rounds. I can't help but ask myself if my life is slipping away just as fast as their breaths falter when they call for help. Tonight, things feel tense. I overheard Dr. Harris snapping at a resident to hurry up. He barely checked on Mrs. Connolly before storming out of the room. A few moments later, I overheard a family raising voices in the hallway. They insisted the doctor wasn't doing his job properly, and their frustration felt all too familiar, an anxious, bubbling rage that could explode at any moment. I feel that gnawing instinct, the tightening in my chest. This isn't just another night shift. The atmosphere feels heavy, like the calm before a storm. As I'm checking on Mr. Thompson, he reaches out, his hand trembling, and I grasp it gently, a flicker of warmth in the chill. "You're my sunshine, Mia," he whispers, and that flicker ignites. I notice the way he watches me, sees me, not the nurse behind the scrubs, but someone who cares. I answer him softly, my heart aching that I don't have more moments like this, as tender as they are fleeting. I tuck away that hand and shuffle over to the medicine station, letting my mind wander again. The cold tile feels unforgiving beneath my shoes as I fill syringes. I close my eyes, listening intently to the heartbeats around me, each one like an echo of where I've been. If my heart can hold the weight of those fears for just another shift, another hour, maybe I can keep this place from absolutely shattering tonight. But as I finish with Mr. Thompson and make my way back to the nurse's station, that tension flares again in the air. Disjointed screams break the silence, and my gut drops. Something's wrong. And that feeling fills the room like the stale odor of antiseptic. That desperate clawing of uncertainty sinks deep, and I brace myself for whatever is about to unfold. The night had settled heavily over Hillcrest Hospital, and I could feel the weight of it compressing my chest like an unseen hand. I had just finished checking in on Mrs. Connolly, who barely recognized me anymore, let alone remembered the stories I'd shared, offering her warmth in the sterile chill. That was when the screams erupted from the hallway, raw and tangled in panic. A family member, a daughter, I overheard sobbing, her voice tinged with accusation. How could you let her suffer like this? Adrenaline surged, anchoring me to my feet. I darted towards the chaos unfolding in the corridor, my heart pounding in sync with the urgency crackling in the air. I knew this terrain. I had navigated these stressful nights 1,000 times before. But something felt oddly off tonight, like walking into a storm without an umbrella. There she was, Amy, Mrs. Connolly's daughter, her face pale and drawn, glaring daggers at the nurses, piercing through the dim light of the hallway like an arrow. "You're neglecting my mother," she roared, her voice sharp enough to draw eyes from the nearby nurses' station. "My mother deserves better than this. How dare you leave her in pain?" If you've ever been unjustly accused, you know exactly how I felt. But rather than wallow in the tempest, I took a deep breath and reminded myself of the protocols I had followed, the medications given, the checks performed. I approached with a steady calm, the kind that flows when you've spent years in this profession, learning to manage every outbreak. In that moment, I was aware of her father in the background, arms crossed, filled with resentment. "You don't get to talk to her like that," he interjected, his tone aggressive. "She's just another number to you guys." Discredit and indignation wrapped around his words, a shroud over the truth. I clenched my fists. This wasn't just about me. It was about Mrs. Connolly, who lay vulnerable on the bed, relying on us for care. I caught a glimpse of her frail figure tucked under the crisp white sheets, her breath hitching without the morphine I had documented giving her last hour. "Sir," I replied, fighting the knot gathering in my throat, "I assure you, every step we take in this ward is to ensure your mother receives the best care possible. But I need you to understand that we're working within certain limitations. Without communication, we can't achieve an optimum level when the patient's relatives become an obstacle." "Why are you making excuses?" Amy shot back, tears of anger glistening in her eyes, twisting the narrative into something I'd only felt keenly in the pit of my stomach. I was no longer just a nurse. Suddenly, I was the embodiment of failure, their bitter resentment fueled by desperation and loss. And that was the moment I realized it was only the beginning. This didn't feel like a standard confrontation. It felt like a storm brewing, preparing to unleash its fury. I turned slowly to the computer on the nurse's station, my fingers gliding across the keys to pull up Mrs. Connolly's chart. It was cold against my skin, but as I began to type the recent measures we've taken for her care, an unsettling weight fell over my heart as I glanced at the medical record. The medication I'd administered for pain relief earlier had indeed been given on schedule, yet I noted the alarmingly high pain levels that seemed to contradict my records. "Come on," I quietly urged the system while docu. Little did I know that this attitude would put me against the entire hospital. When I finally faced them again, neither family member was shouting now, but their frustration still crackled like static in the air, palpable and exhausting. "Look, I get that this is a hard job," Mr. Connolly finally muttered, his voice faltering, but the edge still hanging. "But I need real answers, or I will take this further." I could feel the tension thickening, and as I observed their deepening distress, something solid twisted within me. "I understand that this is emotional. You care deeply," I replied, my voice steady, firmness lending it authority. "But you should also know that we care. I won't let anyone ignore Mrs. Connolly. I commit to being her voice tonight." There was a quiet moment laden with an unease that made my pulse race. As I stepped back, moving slightly away from the family, the atmosphere shifted again, crawling with unspoken accusation. Their faces shut down, hardening into an unfamiliar anger at the system that had left them in uncertain waters. In that pause, I recognized how fragile the lines between care and neglect truly were, and in that silence, I could feel the fissures widening around me. As I approached the nursing station, I squeezed the chart hard, my heart racing. I knew this wasn't over. Something more was at stake than my conscience. Mrs. Connolly was deteriorating, and with every minute passing, I had to make those choices that held the balance of care and confrontation. The storm was just gathering strength, and it was only a matter of time before it would unleash. It was in that silence that everything began to collapse. The waiting room buzzed in the aftermath of that confrontation, almost like the world was mocking me. I had tried, to the best of my ability, to advocate for Mrs. Connolly, to earn a semblance of understanding from her family. But as I stood at the nurse's station, my hands trembling over her chart, the whispers felt like a chorus rising up against me. Behind my careful facade, a storm was brewing, swirling with anxiety and humiliation. I took a deep breath, reaching for the crumpled medical record in front of me. This chart, stained with coffee from the frantic cup I had abandoned earlier, represented my every effort. I wanted so desperately for it to tell a story of care and courage. But each time I looked down, I felt the weight of everyone's judgment, the invisible eyes darting between patients and staff, dissecting every move I made. I glanced over at Mrs. Connolly's room. The door was cracked, and through it I could hear her labored breaths, mingling with the beeping of the monitors, an unnerving lullaby. Suddenly, a sharp clang echoed down the corridor, jerking my attention away from the background noise that had become my constant. I turned just in time to see Dr. Harris storming out from the supply room, his face twisted in anger. "I can't believe you would even," his voice cut off mid-sentence. But I felt its weight as he turned toward the family, the venom in his words stark enough to poison the surrounding air. "You think this is some kind of game?" My heart sank. I had no idea this situation still had the capacity to escalate. The family remained quiet now, mouths agape, and I thought for a moment it might get better. I moved toward Dr. Harris, hoping to diffuse the situation, but he waved me off, eyes flickering with irritation. "I was just up there. These charts are a mess. She's suffering, and there's no reason for it." It all felt surreal, as if the plane of reality I was standing on was shifting beneath me. Then, without warning, Amy reemerged from the fog, her eyes bright with accusation, every bit of her visibly shaking with emotion. "How could my mother be neglected like this?" she demanded, and I felt the collective gaze of the nurses and people in the hallway shift toward me. My stomach dropped. It was one thing to be in a private discussion, but now I'd become the embodiment of their frustration, their voice of blame under the unforgiving fluorescent lights of the hallway. "I've done everything I can," I started, but my voice trembled, just a whisper. The unity of the moment constricted around me, everyone holding their own perception of what was unfolding. "Just a number," Amy's father echoed. "Just another failure in this place." His words penetrated deeper than any needle I had ever used. Instinctively, I was caught in a spiral, fighting the urge to defend, yet feeling each word pierce my confidence. In that moment, the air around us felt electric, filled with contempt. I was drowning in their unyielding frustration, a spotlight illuminating every fault line in my character. "No, let me explain," I implored, but my voice cracked, drowning beneath the tide of their disdain. Voices rose, my heart raced, public shame gnawed at my insides. Then, as if the universe itself was conspiring against me, an alarm blared, shrill and urgent, slicing through the tension. Everyone's gaze snapped to the commotion erupting from Mrs. Connolly's room. My stomach churned, dread pooling in my gut. "See, this is what happens," Amy shouted, tears gathering in the corners of her eyes, aligning their failures with mine. You're killing her! The word echoed like a death knell. I turned towards Mrs. Connolly's room, panic clawing at my chest. I watched the nurses rush in, pushing past me like a tide sweeping away my resolve. The roar of activity enveloped them, the medical team stark against the chaos of my emotions. That's when I felt it. A crushing wave of impotence. The visual of my colleagues moving in swift harmony while I stood paralyzed felt like a betrayal. I was helpless on the sidelines, mere observer, a witness to the moments of care I longed to be part of. Things grew chaotic. In those fleeting seconds, it all fell apart, as if the foundations of my faith in this job were being dismantled right before my eyes. When I glanced toward the family again, I saw Amy's father shaking his head in disbelief, the contempt in his eyes marking me as the villain in their narrative. But I had no idea it was still going to get worse. Their gaze was fixed on me, an investigative panel, assessing my worthiness to be a caregiver, suddenly questioned. I felt their despair wash over me like ice water, chilling me to the bone. Then the sound, the grating buzz of the overhead speaker with an announcement for more staff to assist in Mrs. Connolly's room. The echo of my name pierced through the crowd, launching me into the center of the storm, a spotlight. "That's right," Amy spat, her voice laced with venom. "Call for help, because she obviously can't do it alone." I flinched at her accusation, feeling stripped bare in front of an audience whose eyes were no longer sympathetic, but ruthless. As I stepped forward, I could feel every silent stare penetrating my resolve, their judgment deafening in its cruelty. I was caught between the expectations of a system and the heartbreaking reality of human experience. My own life felt like a crumpled lab coat that had been stained with the weight of care and obligation. The tension coiled tighter until I feared it might snap. But that's when I heard a voice that would change everything, a calm, steady presence from behind me calling my name. It cut through the raging tide, a tether in the storm. "Stay strong, Mia. We need you." It was more than reassurance. It was a promise of revelation just beyond the chaos, a flicker of hope amidst the darkness that threatened to overtake me once and for all. In that moment, I found a thread to hold on to, an inkling that perhaps the truth of care was still left to discover. The air buzzed with something electric and toxic the moment Dr. Harris stepped into the hallway, a storm cloud cloaked in white scrubs. I felt the shift, the ripple through the gathered staff and families. They were locked into this moment with the same intensity as I was, watching, waiting for the tempest to break loose. But tonight, it wasn't just about Mrs. Connolly anymore. It was me, an unwilling lightning rod for disaster. "Do you have any idea how serious this is?" Dr. Harris's voice cracked the dim silence, sharp as a scalpel. He pointed a finger, not at me, but at the collective frustration boiling over in the air. "This isn't just a misunderstanding. It's negligence. You could jeopardize her life." I could feel the heat of his fury bleeding into the crowd, drawing the eyes of patients, nurses, and onlookers alike. But the eyes I felt the most were Amy's, piercing, accusing, carving their judgment into my skin. What was meant to be a moment of guidance for them quickly overshadowed me, draining my resolve and replacing it with a gnawing dread. I didn't neglect her. The words tumbled out before I could think. I checked her every hour. I administered pain relief, but what? He interrupted, the impatience in his voice igniting something inside me that didn't want to be silenced. "Excuses, Mia. Excuses won't save her." The accusations stung. Around us, the atmosphere shifted, almost as if an invisible spotlight had cast me into the very center of a Greek tragedy, painting me the scapegoat. "You're just another number." Amy echoed her father's earlier sentiment, her voice trembling with a mixture of grief and rage. "What did my family ever mean to you? You don't care. None of you do." Her words dripped with disdain. Thickening the tension, as though we were all wrapped in chains, she cast across the room. "I do care," I shouted, my voice quaking, but my chest twisted tighter. Could you give Anne a moment? Dr. Harris asked, his voice still sharp but now layered with a bit of condescension. You've done enough damage for one night. A few nurses shifted, casting brief glances my way, their expressions torn between sympathy and the lingering judgment that has become the fabric of our nightly grind. I felt every eye like a needle, each one pricking at my resolve, threatening to unravel everything I had sown over the years. Why did I seek this line of work, another number, instead of a heart that beats like anyone else's? Why don't you go wash your hands? Dr. Harris said then, dismissive, as if I were merely a child being told to go to timeout. The way he said it was like he was snatching away the authority I'd clung to all night. It struck me as an act of blatant humiliation, both dehumanizing and public. I stood speechless, paralyzed by a swirl of emotions. A chair scraped against the tiled floor as a flimsy excuse for the authority shielded my shame. My willing retreat suddenly transitioned into invisibility. Such a lack of empathy isn't acceptable. Amy grabbed my sleeve, yanking me back slightly, her fury aimed directly at me. You are responsible for this. My mother is suffering because of you. In an instant, my balance wavered, the world tilting in slow motion as I fought the urge to crumble. All I wanted was fairness, an understanding of the night we'd shared with Mrs. Connolly, not barbs flung at me like blades. I took a step back and felt my heels clash against the cold tile behind me, almost as if I were making an escape, but rooted too deeply to detach from the mess around us. Their scrutiny felt like a haunting. My career laid bare and filthy for everyone to see. But I didn't want to be a coward. I wanted to hold fast. Mrs. Connolly needs support, not a finger pointed at her caregivers. I finally managed, though my voice wavered, balancing on a tightrope. We're doing everything we can. I hurled the words into the storm, but they fell flat, swallowed up by the gale. I couldn't help thinking about the way my colleagues watched, like peers observing the falter of a tightrope walker, the uncertainty palpable, a collective breath drawn in anticipation. Yet nothing changed. The emotion in the room swirled around me relentlessly. A piece of advice, Mia, Dr. Harris said low, almost mocking. You might want to consider whether you belong in this role at all. His words were like liquid steel, encasing me in self-doubt as I could feel the weight of misery draping over my shoulders. There it was, that threshold I dreaded crossing, the tipping point. With the eyes of everyone around me boring into my soul, I could feel the blood rushing from my face, the clamoring sound of fear filling my ears. For all my years of hard work, it felt like it was fraying at the seams, leaving me open and exposed, leaving me vulnerable to the shame they projected. Why do you all look at me like that? I challenged, although fear gripped me tightly. I'm just trying to do what I can. I saw Amy's father step forward, his eyes narrowing, and the silent understanding behind me shifted to fear. The strike of judgment became oppressive when the collective weight of their contempt pulled tighter, the gears grinding down with no intention of easing. Because you're the reason my mother is lying in that bed, his voice low, but full of a fury that could ignite. And I swear, if anything happens to her, the threat hung in the air, looming like a storm cloud, ready to unleash its fury on everything we cherished. In that instant, I understood the magnitude of this moment. I was on a precipice, staring down into the depths of uncertainty. Was I about to lose everything? All my dreams for a life dedicated to serving? One slip away from all-consuming failure. My shoulders tightened, carrying burdens I never signed on for. I fought to stay steady, to withstand their torrent. Look, My words caught in my throat, and they echoed like whispers lost in the wind. But the pressure swelled, fingers directed toward me, words flying. "Shame on you." They hissed, echoes of betrayal, years of compassion transformed into contempt. Then it washed over me, a wave of despair that rose against the weight of their disdain. Perhaps I didn't belong here, I thought, a moment's betrayal of my own strength. Thoughts of surrender swept over me like fog rolling in, seeping through every crack in my resolve. The urge to flee, to escape this confrontation, gripped me with icy fingers. Yet in that moment of doubt, a flicker of resilience sparked within me, the tiniest glimmer of defiance, refusing to cascade into oblivion. I wouldn't let them take my conviction, not this time. As I steeled myself to face the accusations, I felt something shift. Just beyond the horizon of my despair, an unexpected presence emerged, someone familiar against the storm. But I didn't know that someone unexpected was about to stand up for me. The night felt like it might swallow me whole, and as I stood there, with the tension thick enough to slice, I could sense Harris, his cold gaze pinpointing me like a target. The arguments flying around me formed an invisible barrier, isolating me now, as I tried to attune my senses to what they might want. As voices rose and accusations flew, all I could think was how much I genuinely wanted to sit down with Mrs. Connolly's family over coffee, explain each step we'd taken for their loved one, rather than simply being the punching bag in this chaotic exchange. I felt my heart racing. The room, a cocktail of emotions swirling around me. The anger from Amy's father was palpable, yet beneath that was fear. Fear that the system wouldn't act when it needed to. "You're just another number," they seemed to chant now, a brooding chorus embedded in my mind. But my own life was threaded into this fabric too. What was I, if not more than a label? I clenched my fists, holding on to that truth, that purpose which grounded me. And then, just when I thought the storm would break me apart, a soft voice broke through. I turned to see Kayla, one of the newer nurses, slipping through the throng, her face a picture of concern. She'd been shadowing me this week, watching, learning, observing. "You need to look at this." My heart sank as I saw the folder in her hands, a brown, well-worn folder that was unmistakably Mrs. Connolly's. It was the kind of folder where you can sense history oozing from every crease and corner. But it was what she was holding tightly against her chest that made my stomach twist like I'd swallowed something sour. "This is important," she whispered, her voice low, urgent. "What is it?" I asked, my anxiety shifting gears. I saw her gaze dart between me and the oncoming storm gathering at my back. "Just look." She opened the folder, and I couldn't help but scooch closer, my breath hitching in my throat. Inside was Mrs. Connolly's medical history, rife with details all too familiar. It detailed every ailment, every treatment charted under the careful hand of nurses and doctors. But as my eyes scanned the pages, I hesitated on one thin piece of paper oddly tucked away in the back. It was a document I'd never seen before. Illegible signatures flowed at the bottom, almost as if scrawled in brain fog. I felt the weight shift, my hands trembling as I held the evidence up to the dim light. There was a date marked in bold, last week. My heart raced. The fleeting hope clawed at me that maybe, just maybe, this was the answer I needed. "What is this?" I whispered. "I think it could change everything." Her eyes narrowed in on the paper, leaning in closer as if it held secrets of a hidden world. As I scanned the signatures, I felt a sinking sensation. The first signature matched one of the doctors in our department, someone I hadn't even thought of checking just moments ago. The name felt like a blemished truth against my skin, the thread in this sprawling tapestry that led back to my despair. "What does it mean?" I asked, my voice wavering. Kayla's expression shifted, concern mingling with confusion. "I don't know, but—" Her words trailed off, uncertainty creeping into her tone. It seems like there were changes made, like treatment decisions had been decided without including the family, or you. There's something off about it. That revelation flickered through my thoughts, a warning bell chiming ever so faintly at the fringe. You mean... I glanced back to where the Connolly family just heatedly argued with Dr. Harris, their expressions a mirror of disbelief, with anger simmering to boil. Someone could have overridden the care we planned? I felt hollow as I realized the layers of this situation. It seemed like the more knowledge I gained, the more it threatened to upend everything I held on to. I didn't want to believe it could be true. The mountain of respect I'd built for my colleagues now trembled under the weight of suspicion. But with every passing second of silence between me and Kayla, that but unfolded larger, stretching the distance between us, pooling dread at our feet. In some twisted way, the implications of her findings shook me to my core. Would this discovery force me into the role of the scapegoat, a casualty of a cruel system, leaning into the flaw of a shared fate? I could see the tea. Here I was, trying to be the nurse I always dreamed of, but now the accusations I'd faced rang louder in my ears, stifling hope. The folder trembled in my hands, a relic from the past I never wished to unearth. It placed me in the line of fire, while leaving a faint glimmer of truth wrapped tightly within its pages, just moments from being drawn out like a truth lit by flame. I could sense we were teetering on the edge of something seismic, a realization just waiting to grip hold of everything that had punctured me so deeply through the night. And then, like a crack in ice, I felt the quiet but sudden grip of resolve take root within me. What if this didn't just shatter me further? What if this evidence pointed to the way out? My breath caught in my throat, buoyed by the idea that somehow this truth might unveil the hidden complications surrounding my place in all of this. "Kayla," I murmured, my voice threading the air with urgency I hadn't felt before. "We need to take this." The weight of a mother's life, a daughter's love, and my fragile place in between bore down on me without mercy. In that moment, clarity washed over me like ice-cold water, a fleeting hope intertwined with the heaviness of night. With a final glance at the folder clasped in my hands, I realized someone knew the truth and had just let it slip. The hallway was drowned in chaos, voices tangled like fishing nets, snapping and snarling, filling the space with a tension thick enough to choke on. I was on the precipice of something profound. Kayla stood next to me, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and determination as we clutched the folder like a lifeline. "The document takes precedence," she urged, breathless. But before I could respond, the air shifted sharply as Dr. Harris strode back, a white storm cloud of indignation trailing behind him. He pushed through the gathering crowd, his eyebrows arched in disbelief, as if my very existence was a betrayal. "What's going on?" he demanded, his eyes darting from me to the folder. That telltale paper threatened to unveil everything. "Dr. Harris," I said, trying to steady my voice amid the whirlwind. "There's something in this. It could change how we view Mrs. Connolly's care." "Save it!" He cut me off, glaring. "You've done enough damage for one night." He turned to the family, who stood wide-eyed, emotions flickering like a fire about to ignite. They were still simmering over my earlier confrontation, caught in the crossfire of their worry for Mrs. Connolly and their resentment for me. But amid their outrage, I could sense a glimmer of hope that had me standing firm. I wasn't just going to let this moment slip away, not when everything felt like it was wrapping tightly around a furious convergence. "I'm not backing down," I stated, the words tumbling out like a declaration. Dr. Harris's eyes darkened as he clenched his fists. I held the folder closer, a potent force against the looming storm. "There are signatures here, decisions made without proper consent. We can't just ignore that." "Signature or not, nothing can change what's been done," he answered, his voice dangerously low, as if he were trying to negotiate my place in this world of care. And then, with a performative air, he turned to the family, his voice dripping with sympathy. I know this has been difficult, but we're doing everything we can. We didn't intend for anyone to suffer." In that moment, I watched Mrs. Connolly's family, their incredulity deepening. "You didn't intend?" Amy's trembling voice sliced through the atmosphere. "Is that all you have? My mother's best interests matter more than your convenient intentions. How dare you shove me aside with excuses?" The gravity of their pain curled around my heart like thorns. That raw fear was an echo reverberating within me. But I was done letting it paralyze me. The folder felt heavy in my hands, but with every beat, I clenched it tighter. Dr. Harris needed to see it for himself, or nothing would sway him. "Look," I shouted, finally raising the folder in front of him. "Look at what's inside. Something isn't right." My voice rang out, cutting through the chaos. The weight of his denial could no longer oppress the truth. It was larger than him, and larger than me. Dr. Harris hesitated, his anger flickering like a candle about to be snuffed. The family moved closer, curiosity mixing fear with the tension sizzling in the hallway. I felt everyone leaning in, like soldiers poised for a game-changing play. "Fine, let's see it then," he snapped, snatching the folder and flipping through it, the pages wavering under the weight of everyone's gaze. I watched as confusion crept over his features. As he tracked the earlier decisions and crossing signatures, I could see the cracks forming in his authority. "Wait, this can't be." The mumbled protests tumbled from his mouth. His brows pinched deeply as he matched the names scrawled across the paper to our nurse's station. "This isn't accurate. You can't." "Can't what?" I pressed, taking the folder back from him. "I can't expose the truth." "Don't do this, Mia," he pleaded, desperation flooding his tone. "This was a mistake. If you want to bring this up, it could destroy lives." And in that moment, a pulse of pity flickered inside me, barely rising above the chaos around us, like a timid little flame. Suddenly, I imagined what it looked like for him. Had he truly believed this was an error? Did he think by brushing it under the rug he could shield us all from the fallout? But no. Beneath that self-serving plea, I couldn't allow my compassion to dictate truth. That was a choice already made. "No, Dr. Harris. This isn't about shielding anyone anymore," I whispered, shifting my stance definitively. "Your arrogance won't bury Mrs. Connolly's suffering. She deserves more." The room buzzed awash with reactions. Colleagues shot glances between each other, gathering momentum around the palpable conviction I exuded. It was electric, as though my determination sparked fire in their hearts too. Nurses dipped their heads in silent acknowledgement. The family stood rooted, eyes fixed on how this entire moment swirled like a dark ocean, threatening to engulf the very thing we were meant to protect. I gestured around, watching the emotions wash over everyone's faces. The doubt, the surprise, the raw need for honesty. They shifted in anticipation. It was like waiting for a storm to unleash its rain. Dr. Harris had started to back down, his eyes focused not just on me but the evidence that weighed on him now. The fracture of his authority became apparent in that moment, quieting the tidal wave of yelling and accusations. The truth was breaking free. "Enough!" I finally shouted, my voice cutting through hesitation. "You're the reason we're all tangled in this web. No more excuses. Justice matters, and Mrs. Connolly deserves every shred of it." As the room tightened around me, I felt that irrevocable decision latch onto my being, as if granting me wings. There would be no turning back. I stepped forward into the blaring spotlight of awareness. It's time we hold each other accountable. The silence hung heavy like a storm cloud ready to unleash, emotions swirling until they exploded in every direction. A gasp at the back came from one of the nurses. An offense to the facade we'd all been upholding. "Mia's right. We can't let this continue." A chorus of agreement swelled like a tidal wave. I locked eyes with the Connolly family, their faces shifting from fury to something softer, vulnerability crackling in the air. I'd given them the power to rise beneath the weight of this storm. "Thank you," Amy whispered, her voice trembling but fierce, gratitude blooming among the ashes of fury. And with that, I let hope take root. Dr. Harris's shoulders sagged, his struggle tremoring beneath the burdens he carried. I should have felt pity as he fell apart, but it burned only pale embers in my heart now, overshadowed by the realization that he had chosen ego over care. "Yes, we need accountability," I spat, the words tasting potent as they came, "and that begins with you." In that charged room, I felt the walls shift, the earth tremoring with reverberated truth. We need to do better because lives depend on it. The world held its breath, poised between fear and revelation, and I felt liberated, knowing justice wasn't just a distant notion. It was inescapable, forged through our resolve. "Shattered egos are no match for shattered lives," I declared, my voice steady like the hushed rumblings of thunder in the background. As I glanced around, I could see it, the promise of something far brighter unfurling. The heart of healing revived, carving paths out of despair, thrumming in harmony where clarity echoed with every beat. I never imagined I'd be the one to catalyze a revolution of care, but here I was, and it all culminated in the simplest truth: honesty burns. The sun broke over Hillcrest Hospital, casting pale gold rays through the sterile windows of the nurses' station. I stood there, sipping my too-strong cup of coffee, half listening to the chatter of my colleagues who buzzed with a new energy, bright eyes filled with purpose. It had been a few weeks since that night of chaos, the moment everything shifted beneath our feet. I couldn't quite believe how much had changed since then. It felt like we breached a dam. Everyone was riding a current of renewed determination. The Connolly family had become advocates for hospital reform, a testament to how a voice could disrupt complacency. Connolly was out of the woods now, thanks to renewed care protocols initiated after my confrontation with Dr. Harris. Sometimes I'd catch Amy in the break room, pulling a patient aside to advocate passionately for their rights, and my heart swelled with pride. It was a different air in the hospital, an unspoken pact among us, a commitment to be better, not just in our duties, but as human beings. I had begun taking on a new role, kind of an unofficial case manager for families like the Connollys, using my experiences to guide them through the labyrinth of hospital bureaucracy. I'd spent many late nights crafting outlines on how to navigate pain management discussions and how to feel empowered in the face of fear. Each time a family walked through those doors, I felt a spark within me, igniting my purpose anew. I loved that I could turn the tide for someone navigating the unknown, providing lifelines where hope felt fleeting. With all the changes, my evenings spent in the hospital. After realizing how wrapped up I'd become in my job, I made a point to shuffle my schedule around for my son's crucial milestones. Just last week, I attended his kindergarten graduation and watched his little face beam brighter than the sun, confidence radiating in every tiny step. I even brought cupcakes with his name scrawled in bright blue icing. He ran up to me afterward, mounting our laughter on the winds of shared joy. It was those moments that stitched my weary heart back together, reminding me of the intersections I sought. But there was still an unexpected twist in this story. Just when I thought my dedication to nursing had settled into a comfortable routine, I received an email one morning that would change everything. The hospital just a few months ago, I'd felt like a complete failure. But here I was, at the intersection of growth and advocacy. As I sat in my office, the reality washed over me. I was no longer just a voice in the shadows, but a beacon of change. And while I'd once grappled with the fear of being reduced to just another number, I'd become part of a narrative bigger than myself, one threaded with resilience, hope, and a firm reminder that even amid turmoil, purpose can be reborn. I smiled at the thought, feeling lighter than I had in years, knowing the ripples of my courage would continue to touch lives long after my own hands had stitched them together. The documentary premiere was just days away, and I could feel a mix of excitement and anxiety swirling inside me like a tempest. I'd spent so many sleepless nights nursing my doubts and fears, replaying the drama with Mrs. Connolly's family. And now, that moment felt distant, tangible only in my rearview mirror. I was a little shaky on my F. "Can everyone please take their seats?" my supervisor called out, a warm smile brightening her face. I took a deep breath, mentally preparing myself for what was coming. The lights dimmed, and the screening began. What unfolded on the screen was real. Voices that had once tangled in anger shifted into powerful stories of hope and resilience. My heart pounded with anticipation as I watched snippets of my interactions with the Connolly family. My moments of vulnerability laid bare for all to see. I could hear their voices echo. "We may have been lost, but we'll make sure no one else feels forgotten." They were strong, their passion shone through, and I felt my own emotions flicker back to life. As the documentary progressed, I could see familiar faces around me nodding along. It reignited that fire in all of us, a shared understanding of the importance of compassion in our visits with patients. When the credits rolled, the room erupted in applause, a thunderous expression of what we'd accomplished together. Afterward, the lights brightened and Michael, our hospital administrator, stepped to the front. "I want to thank Mia for her bravery in sharing her story," he said, his voice steady. "This is a powerful reminder that change is possible, and change begins with each of us." I felt a swell of pride. I hadn't just found my voice. I'd helped others reclaim theirs. Families were speaking out, patients sharing their journeys, caregivers stepping up as advocates. I was overflowing with hope, each day reaffirming our mission of empathy as central to patient care. Later that evening, I stood at the nurses' station, soaking in the satisfaction of camaraderie and dedication that filled the air. The team buzzed with renewed energy. We leaned into conversations about upcoming workshops and strategies for advocating for patient rights. It was exhilarating, the fulfillment of a collective dream, a hard-fought battle now yielding sweet fruit. As the weeks melted into months, I watched as the Connolly family formed an advisory board at the hospital. They became the voices I had once advocated for, guiding policies that shifted the landscape of care. I felt so incredibly lucky to have experienced this transformation with them. Before long, it was time for my own transition. As I prepared to leave my position and embark on a new opportunity at a health advocacy organization, I stood before my colleagues one last time. "We are just getting started," I said, my heart full as I spoke. "Let's keep pushing boundaries. We've created a ripple, and we need to keep growing that wave." Hugs and well wishes flowed my way, each gesture a reminder that I would always have a home at Hillcrest. I turned one last time to that comforting familiarity. It was bittersweet, but I felt resolute, confident that I was headed toward a future fueled by purpose. As I stepped out into the sunlit street, I took a deep breath of fresh air, knowing for certain that I was headed toward the unknown. Yes, but also that my heart was filled with something much more powerful: hope. And with that, I call on all of you, subscribe immediately to this channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and keep this community thriving. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. And don't forget to instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to know this conclusion. Let's keep the story alive together.